In this video, I'm going to show you some capital budgeting techniques that will help us in determining whether or not to accept moving forward with an investment or a project. So the first one I'm going to show you is net present value. And I'm going to use Excel in order to calculate my discounted cash flows. So I'll set up year 0, year 1, year 2, and year 3. And year 0 will be the initial investment. So that's $90,000. And I'll put that in as minus because that's a cash outflow. And then each year I'm going to have a cash inflow of $23,000, another inflow of $38,000, and another inflow of $60,000. So that's cash coming in. But then the firm will also have to spend $15,000 to close out the project. So what you'll need to do here is take the $60,000 and then just minus the $15,000 because we want the net cash flow. So what's coming in and what's coming out. Doesn't look right. What's coming in and 15,000 is going out. Okay. I was talking and typing at the same time. So now that we have our cash flows, I can go ahead and calculate the net present value. And so I'm going to just go to my formulas, find the financial calculator, and scroll until you find NPV. Now, the rate that we're going to use is, I should have typed this interest rate beforehand. Let me just close that. So the interest rate that we're going to use is this 10%. That's our cost of capital. So now let's click on this formulas. Financial, net present value. That's 10%. So now value 1 is your first cash flow. So don't include your initial investment. Value 2 is your next cash flow. And value 3 is your third cash flow. So now I'm just going to say okay. So that gives us 86,123. But now what we have to do is take away our initial investment from that. So this is the discounted cash flows. And then when we minus our initial investment, that will give us our net present value. So I'll just say, link it right to here, the 90,000. So it ends up being negative. So essentially anything that is below 0, we would not accept. So we would only accept projects that have an NPV of 0 or greater. And I'll just put that in dollars. Okay, so the next one that we'll look at is the internal rate of return. Now I'm just going to calculate this first and then I'll show you what it means. So it's very easy. Once you calculate the net present value, you can go back up to the formulas and go to the financial calculator and just scroll until you find IRR. And this time we're going to highlight all of our cash flows. So the initial investment plus the 3 years of cash flow. And then just go okay. And because this is shown as a percentage, we'll want to hit the percentage button and just go to 2 decimal places. But you can see there's more numbers in there. So essentially, this is the rate that will return net present value to 0. So just to prove that to you, what I'm going to do is change this interest rate and just make it the IRR rate. Now remember, we have this interest rate linked to the NPV calculation. Now look what happens to NPV. Ooh, it goes to 0. So the rate is 7.78%. That brings that NPV to 0. So now we'll just have to analyze this. So our weighted average cost of capital means that we can't finance projects that give us less than 10%, because that means that we won't even be able to recover the costs that we have for our own company. And remember, the weighted average cost of capital was looking at the debt, the preferred shares, the common shares, and the equity of our company. So it's almost like the opportunity cost. Now, this project only yields a return of less than 7.78%. So at 7.78%, this NPV will end up being 0. So at the end of the day, we cannot accept this project based off of the net present value being negative and the internal rate of return actually being less than our weighted average cost of capital. So the next technique I'm going to show you how to do is calculating the payback period. Now, with the payback period, one of the drawbacks on it is that it doesn't consider discounted cash flows, so we don't need to factor in the interest rate, but it's also really easy to do. We're just trying to figure out how many years it's going to take us to recuperate our original investment. So how long it's going to take to pay off the $90,000. So the easiest thing is to just do a running balance right beside all of your cash flows. So in year 0, we're minus 90. That's our original investment. Then in year 1, once we get $23,000 in cash, we end up having $67,000 left of the investment to pay off. Then in year 2, when I take the 67 and the 38, I have $29,000 of the investment to pay off. And then in year 3, I have $16,000. So in year 3, between year 2 and year 3, it looks like we paid off the investment because this is where it becomes positive. Okay, so now I'll just say payback period, so PP, and we'll go like this. So I know it's between years 2 and year 3, so I'm just going to put a line through that. And so now I'll just put 2, and then I'll say plus. Now, all I need to do is take the balance, which is the $29,000, and then just divide that by the next cash flow of $45,000. And I actually just want this to be a positive 29 instead of a negative 29. So I'll just go into the formula and just put a negative there. So that just flips it to 29. So essentially all I'm doing is taking 29,000 divided by 45,000. And we'll show this to 2 decimal places. So that means it's 2.64 years in order to pay this investment back. Now, I'll just show you the math on that too. So I did 29,000 divided by 45,000. So that one's that cash flow, and then this one is that cash flow. And then that comes out to 29,000 divided by 45,000. That comes out to 0.64. And then what I did is I saw that this was in between year 2 and year 3. So I said 2.64. And that's how I got this number here. So basically, we want to have the shortest payback period as possible in order to accept the project. Now, the last one is the Profitability Index. So I'll just say PI. And what I would do here, probably the easiest way to do the calculation, is I'll give you a formula. You take your net present value and then divide that by the initial investment. And then get that answer and add 1 to it. Okay, so if I take my NPV of negative 3877 and I divide that by my initial investment. So I don't want the initial investment in brackets, so I'll just do minus 90. So if I'm going to click on the cell, I'm just turning that into a positive. So we always want to put the initial investment just in as a positive. So whatever the NPV is, that can be positive or negative, divided by the initial investment, and then adding 1 to that. Okay, so that gives me 0.96. So essentially anything below 1 is not going to be profitable. So in this case, because NPV is negative, the PI is not going to be profitable. The IRR is not going to be profitable. The only one that might just stand out on its own is the payback period, because that just shows the length of us paying back the investment. But even in this case, you're almost taking the entire time to pay the investment back, which probably isn't a good thing either. So I'll just write out the formula or the numbers that I used for the profitability index. So I took the minus 3877 of the NPV, and I divided that by the 90,000. So again, I just don't want to put negative 90,000. I just want the absolute value of the investment. But this NPV has to be either positive or negative, because that's what's going to make this less than 1. And then once you get that answer, you just add 1 to it. And then that gives me the 0.96.